My name is Piper Light, and I'm the Outreach Manager for Higher Education Services Corporation. Thank you so much for joining tonight's presentation on understanding financial aid award letters. We here at HASC thought partnering with EdCap on this presentation was going to really be beneficial to students across New York State and parents. So everyone is aware we will have Nancy, who's on the call from EdCap, answering questions throughout the presentation in the chat. So please feel free to ask questions there. And let's get it kicked off. Carolina?
Thank you so much, Piper. It is great to be with everyone here. I know that 5 p.m. can be a busy time, so really appreciate the time you're allocating to hopefully gain a little bit more insight into things that you should be considering, whether you're a student or a parent trying to help a student pay for college. So give me 1 second, and I'm just going to do full screen. Give me 1 second. Okay, Nancy, if you can confirm you can see my PowerPoint, that would be great.
Yep, we can see it.
Okay, so we're gonna get started. This is the agenda. We're gonna cover a lot, but there should be plenty of time to ask additional questions. As mentioned, if you have any questions, we generally prefer if you have access to the Q&A to type in your question there. Nancy will be behind the scenes answering them. You don't have to wait for us to pause. A little bit about our program, the Education Debt Consumer Assistance Program. We were created in 2019 by a nonprofit organization called Community Service Society of New York. We are a statewide program that provides assistance related to any issue involving higher ed financing. When we first started, our focus was on student loans, so we currently still offer help understanding student loan repayment plans, accessing loan forgiveness discharge programs, applying for consolidation, deferment, and forbearance when necessary, resolving issues with lenders and servicers, and obviously getting out of default for those individuals who have student loans in default. In most recent time, we have expanded our services to include applying for financial aid. That includes federal aid and state aid, and obviously understanding financial aid award letters. At the end of the day, we want to be proactive and preventative to make sure that people access college but are not burdened over decades with student loan debt, because at the end of the day, our ultimate goal is to make sure that people get a return on investment on their college degree. I am going to provide a brief college funding overview just to set the stage, and then we're going to dive into how do we compare financial aid award letters and some tips. What is financial aid? Common, it's any funding, whether federal, state, or institutional or private, aimed to helping someone pay for college expenses. Now, the key here is that financial aid may include, especially in your financial aid award letter, money that must be repaid in the forms of loans. And I think that is a key distinction that we want to make sure that you are able to identify what is money that doesn't have to be paid versus money that may need to be paid. As mentioned, there are different types of aid at the federal government. We have federal aid, again, provided by the federal government through the FAFSA application process. In New York State, as you'll learn, we have different programs that help pay for college, and that fund comes again from the state. And we also have institutional aid. Institutional aid actually refers to aid provided by the college or university, and that's going to vary depending on each college. So be aware of that. And then scholarships is the easiest one to address, which is basically free money that helps pay for college and you don't have to repay it, so to speak. Again, the big takeaway here is make sure you understand what is free money versus money that you must repay, and make sure that you apply for all aid possible, because that's going little by little, that's going to help you reduce the amount of money that you're going to have to repay. So one quick FAFSA overview. I hope everyone here has already applied for FAFSA. If you haven't, you want to do this as soon as possible. This application is required whether you're eligible for any federal aid or not. Most schools are going to require you to complete the FAFSA in order for them to determine what additional aid you may be eligible for. If you're applying for a private college or university, you may also have to complete something known as the CSS profile. So you always want to check in with the college or university you want to attend to know of any deadlines and what applications you must complete. Now, when it comes to New York State aid, you should be applying after you apply for the FAFSA for TAP. That is the main application to get state aid. And there's other options like the Excelsior Scholarship, Enhanced Tuition Awards, which I'm going to go over shortly. Okay. Now, how to pay for higher education. I like to talk about this general overview of what's gonna go where. So we always think about college as tuition and fees and thinking that's probably the bulk of it. And while it is the bulk of it, I want to caution you that room and board is becoming more and more expensive, where it can easily account up to 40%, if not more, of the total cost. My takeaway from my client experience is that per year you're spending about $25,000 for room and board at a college or university. And once you multiply that by four, you can see how even if you can come up with free money to pay for tuition and fees, you may still be in debt if you don't have the funds to pay for that out of pocket. There's other expenses like books and supplies. Again, all of this adds up little by little, transportation, and then obviously health insurance, other extracurricular fees. If someone is studying abroad, that's going to be an added expense. If you yourself have kids and are going to need daycare, that may be another added expense. From this, again, the takeaway is yes, it's definitely tuition and fees, but be aware that room and board can be a heavy cost, and that really adds to the debt unintentionally sometimes. Okay, how do we prioritize funding? As common sense would have it, you want to focus on the free money, right? Money that does not have to be paid. That's going to be grants and scholarships. You also want to consider work study. If you are the student, when you apply for FAFSA, you can opt in for work study. Now, work study, as I'll talk about, it's in general great. It's going to depend on the school and your financial need, whether you're eligible for work study. Now, things that must be repaid are loans, and I have an entire slide on the different type of loans that I'm gonna go over what they are and some red flags for you. Now, grants and scholarships, again, when we think about federal aid, it's gonna be the Pell Grant. There's also the Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant. That one is based on extreme financial need. The schools have to participate, they get a bucket of money, and then they allocate it to the students. In order to have a bigger chance of being eligible for that one, it's like first come, first serve basis. So we always encourage people to apply at the beginning when FAFSA opens up, because that increases your chances of getting it. Again, if you meet the general requirements, financial need. The big one in New York State is going to be TAP. If you haven't completed it, you want to do it. That's going to be a key in, again, getting a little bit more money to offset the cost. There's also the Excelsior Scholarship. If you are going to a SUNY or CUNY, you can apply for that, and that's going to help you with tuition. And there's specific requirements, and I should say that everything has requirements, income requirements. And if you ask me, sometimes the income requirements are not high enough and leave people out from aid that they really need, which is unfortunate. But again, the reality is that all this is going to have requirements that you must meet the eligibility criteria. The last one I really want to flag for you, because I think this is something overlooked. The college and university also has their own aid and scholarship criteria. They may have scholarship based on the major athletics and all that. When in doubt, ask about it, because there may be additional funds the college or university may have that you might not be aware of. So be sure to follow up with the university to see what are additional funding sources. Now let's talk briefly about maximum award amounts. Pell Grants are up to, and that's key, up to 7,395 for the year. The Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant up to 4,000. Again, this is the max someone can get. It's based on need mostly. So it doesn't mean that everyone who's eligible gets the full amount. It can be less. That's just the max amount. TAP 5,665. Excelsior Scholarship will help cover any remaining tuition after they account for other aid that you are getting. So again, it's different forms of aid, and the reason why you want to apply for all of it if you're eligible is because everything's going to help to reduce your out-of-pocket expenses. Where do you find scholarships? Honestly, you can find them everywhere. I feel that the biggest challenge about scholarships is just creating a routine to really sit down. If you're the student, you want to make it your part-time job. If you're a parent, you probably also want to make it a part-time job along with the student. I can tell you that once you have a general personal statement, once you have your references, it is very easy to adapt that personal statement to meet the eligibility requirements for various scholarships. There are scholarships that can fund your entire education. So make sure that you look into that and really make it a priority. Again, this is your best shot at reducing your out-of-pocket expenses. If you feel overwhelmed like I do sometimes Googling online, you can always just go on a Saturday or when you can to your local library and ask for some help. They're going to be delighted to pull out all the resources, whether online or actual books, and help you through that process. Work study. I really want to elevate work study because not only would the student be able to earn some money, they're also going to gain some experience. As I mentioned, work study is not a given, meaning depending on the institution, how much they have, how many people apply for it, that's what's going to determine whether you get it and for how many hours you're approved. Payment under work study is going to be usually at least the minimum um, um, salary or hourly rate required by law. Some positions may pay more. Usually they're on campus. If are off campus, there are placements that are vetted by the university. So I love work study because your employer is going to know when you have finals, when you have midterms, and accommodate your schedule to be able to prioritize your studies. And again, I cannot emphasize you're getting some additional money and you're getting experience. So always select yes, you want work study. Even if you do select it, it doesn't force you to take it, but you still want to have the option just in case. Okay. Federal loans, this is where we flag and flag because it can get tricky. One can borrow a lot without really realizing the consequences. So after you get all your aid, you're going to be offered federal student loans. And, the institution may provide some information, maybe not a lot of information for both federal and private loans. I can tell you that in some situations, I've had clients come to me and say they never inform me about federal loans. They just steer me into private loans. So that's a red flag. Um, Generally, if you qualify for federal loans, which the requirements are very generic, meaning most people qualify, you're going to be able to borrow as a parent up to the cost of attendance, which I'm going to talk about. There is no credit check like a private loan, and generally no cosigner, which again allows for a lot of people to be able to take out federal loans. You can take out federal loans as a student, and you can also take out federal loans as a parent. I'm going to go over in more detail. The big thing about federal loans over private loans is that once you enter repayment, you're going to have more, hopefully, repayment plan options. I know there's a lot happening right now in the media. And you may be eligible for forgiveness and discharge options, unlike a private loan that they generally want their money and you have a set payment term. Um, okay, so this is where I want you to focus on when you think about federal loans. If you are the student, you will be offered federal loans, either subsidized or unsubsidized. This is for undergraduates. The interest rate right now is 6.53. The reason why a student may consider taking out loans under their name before a parent takes that loan is because of the interest rate. You're going to get a lot more a better interest rate, and you may get more repayment plan options in comparison to a Parent Plus loan. Now, what's the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized? Subsidized means that the interest does not accumulate while you're in school and certain periods of deferment. Now, unsubsidized, you start accumulating interest after the loan is dispersed. So be aware of that. If you're going to graduate school, you could borrow a lot. There's some limits, but the threshold right now is still very high. The interest rate for that is 8.08. If you're also going to grad school, you may be offered Direct Plus loans. The interest rate there is a little bit higher, it's 9.08. And you could borrow Direct Plus loans up to the cost of attendance, which again, it's a little caveat because you could borrow a lot. Going on to Direct Plus loans for parents, the interest rate is 9.8. It may seem high, but even though it's high, I still want to emphasize you should look into them before you consider private loans, because you would have more protections. Now, I keep flagging this cost of attendance. The fact that you can borrow up to the cost of attendance means that it's easy to borrow a lot and not realize that you might not be able to repay it back, or you may struggle to repay it back, or you're going to end up repaying this debt for many more years than you ever anticipated. So be aware of that. Technically, Parent Plus loans are payable, meaning you have to start repaying them 60 days after you get the loan, but federal loans allow you to put them in a deferment, in school deferment, while the student is in school. But what's going to happen is that your debt balance is going to grow at 9.08% this year, for example, because you're accumulating interest. So be aware of that. Again, big takeaway, Parent Plus loans are still eligible for more options than a private loan. Direct consolidation loans simply allow you to consolidate within the federal student lending system multiple loans that you took out into one. That can be helpful or strategic in some specific circumstances. I want to talk really briefly about the borrowing limits. So we just discussed the different type of loans. If you are a dependent student, as you can see in this first column, you can see the max that you could get in federal loans. And then you can see the aggregate at the end, 31,000 for the 4 year, so to speak. Again, if you are going to graduate school based on current rules, you can probably borrow up to the cost of attendance to complete your degree, which can be a lot of money. If you're an independent student, you're allowed to borrow a little bit more, and you can see that on the second column there. I've already talked about private loans. They do require a credit check. Obviously, you have to show that you have a good credit and then you have the ability to repay the loan. The big challenge with private loans is that both the student and usually a co-signer, because the student might not have the job or credit to be able to take on the debt, they will require a co-signer. And the problem with a co-signer is that you are 100% liable on that loan if the student borrower does not pay, or if they fall behind, your credit is going to be hit. Now, a lot of people are told, don't worry about it. Once the student starts working, he can take you off. The reality is that that student has to have the job and repayment history, 1 to 2 years of impeccable repayment history, before they even consider your request to release you as a co-signer. I can tell you getting someone released as a co-signer is nearly impossible, in part because current federal and state laws do not require lenders to give you co-signer release, and they have very strict criteria. And if you just make a call 1 month and say, hey, I cannot pay this month, they're going to use that to deny a co-signer release. So be aware of that. Now, in terms of the interest rate, one thing that I hear a lot from families is like, you can get a better interest rate with a private loan. Well, not necessarily. You want to make sure that you know whether that interest rate is variable or fixed. And two, even if a federal loan is slightly higher, you still benefit from a lot more protections by having the federal loan versus the private. And I always say, if you take out a federal loan, you can always refinance it into a private down the line if that's something that works in your favor, because you're going to repay it off soon and you want to save on interest rate. You cannot do that the other way around. In other words, if you take out a private loan, you cannot convert it into a federal loan. College Funds 529, these are tax advantage investment vehicles. We have one in New York, most states have them, and you basically, it's like a savings account. that you invest, that gets invested, and you can deposit on that. It can cover obviously college expenses. In recent times, it's allowing people to pay off student loans. It can also cover tuition from K to 12. Usually this comes in handy when you start early, when you have a kid and you establish a 529, because it gives you time to save and let the account grow for when the time comes. But know whether you have a 529. And the important thing about that is figure out how much you have if you have one, and then figure out when are you going to be spending it down, whether you're going to allocate it across the 4 years or whatever game plan you're going to have. Okay, I'm going to stop there to see if there's any questions or anything else Nancy wants to add before I go into the crux of this presentation.
Yes, so there's a couple of things. First of all, somebody was kind enough to to mention that apparently we had the application date deadline for TAP incorrect. It's actually June 30th and not May 1st. So it's June 30th of the academic year for which you are applying. So we apologize for that and we'll correct that.
Yep.
A couple of other things. Somebody asked if you can pay your federal student loans off early if you have a good enough job, and the answer to that is absolutely. You can always pay more than the required payment with no penalty, and the quicker you pay your loans off, the more you'll save overall over the life of the loan. There was a question, and Carolina, maybe you know the answer to this, on the financial aid financing plan, which I'm assuming this person means awards letter for SUNY schools. Does the TAP award say TAP, or is it just labeled as a state grant? I'm not sure how it's actually reflected on the awards letter.
It might be in, like, this is what I'm gonna get to here. It might say grants from your state. Piper, I don't know if you're there and can confirm, but we can confirm for you.
Okay.
And I'll talk about this sample in a second, but we'll confirm as well.
And then one last question that I was just about to answer. The person said, when does the loan start accruing interest? So for federal loans, unsubsidized loans start accruing interest as soon as they're dispersed, and they will accrue interest while you're in a school deferment. If you have a subsidized loan, that will not accrue interest while you're in an in-school deferment and perhaps during other periods of deferment over the life of the loan. And that's it.
Okay, great. Okay, now we're moving on to the reason why we're here, understanding award letters. So, New York State has a standard award letter requirement, meaning colleges and universities in New York State have to use a similar template. It's going to vary a little bit. And in fact, this is like the sample template from a few years ago where it may have Perkins loans in there. Perkins are no longer being offered. So, you want to really take a look at your financial aid award letter. You should be able to identify all this information on your award letter. Again, we're going to confirm exactly how like schools tend to disclose the state aid, the TAP aid. You're also going to know how much you're getting from TAP, because when you do the application, you'll get some acknowledgement of that. So there's different ways to confirm that information. So this is an overview. Again, New York State is going to have a standard form. Now, chances are many of you are looking into schools outside of New York, and they may not have the same standard form. Although I want to say that most attempt to, because it is also in their interest to have it in a way that it's consistent. So let's talk about a big item, which is the net cost. The net cost in a financial aid award letter is the amount you are expected to pay after you deduct grants and scholarship from the total cost. It is an estimate and does not necessarily include all expenses, right? It's going to be just on the core expenses. The university is obviously going to look into the tuition and fees stuff that they know, and overall estimate on like books and stuff like that. But if there are additional expenses related to a particular individual, it may not be included in that, right? How will you cover the net costs? This is where we're going to focus on. You can look into work study if you're paying out of pocket, and then obviously as a last resort, I'm sorry, federal loans and private loans at the very end. Now, there is a couple things I want to highlight, and I do have a little demo for you on a tool that we're going to share. And that is, the cost of attendance is going to be your big number. It's going to have the room and board. You can tell here from this example, room and board is going around the same across, meaning most schools it's going to be ballpark. It's not going to be like $10,000 difference for room and board, although there might be some schools. So you're going to see the cost of attendance. And as I mentioned, then you're going to look at like what were the scholarship grants. With the scholarships or grants, if they're provided by the institution or even if they're provided by um, a private method, you want to understand the eligibility requirements. You want to understand whether it's only for the first year, is it for the all 4 years? What are the requirements to sustain that? Some scholarships may have like a GPA. Some scholarships may require you to stay in a particular field. And that can be a cost of a headache because sometimes parents don't realize that it was just the first year that the institution, for example, was giving them $30,000 and that it was not renewable. Well, that's going to have a big effect because how do you come up with $30,000 for the remaining 3 years, for example? So be aware of that. So after that, again, cost of attendance, then you have your scholarships, you're going to have the net cost. And that is really the number that you want to focus on because you want to know how much are you going to have to come up with from your own money or other sources to pay the total cost of attendance, right? As I mentioned, sometimes during your financial aid award letter review, you may think that the loans here for the student, whether they're subsidized or unsubsidized, or for the student, are free money because the way they're presented, but they're not. Again, I recommend that if you need to borrow, the student is a uh, better fit to borrow because they're going to get a lower interest rate. If you want to help them pay, you could always help them pay. But in general, they're going to benefit more because they'll have more options. Now, let's say we add what the student may get here, then you're going to have to look at the alternatives, right? Like, are they going to be able to do work study? Maybe not the first year, second year. How much is that going to be? Do you have a 529? Any savings? So you want to come up with all those costs because at the end, you want to see how much realistically do you, if you do, have to borrow in federal loans. And again, I'm going to insist private loans should be as a last resort. And sometimes when I'm having this conversation with parents, they ask me, well, I have a mortgage, I have equity, should I take it out? And I get really nervous about that because I rather you take out, for example, the federal Parent Plus loan, figure out how things play out, and then if you decide that you want to pay it off with a home equity loan, you could do that. But there's a lot of moving parts during the academic years that you want to step back and really analyze your finances and also consider retirement and other priorities or life events that you may be having. Now, any remaining balance, again, after you include this, you can usually address the remaining balance with the Parent Plus loans to get it to zero. But I want to point out here, you may have different universities that are offering you a really tempting scholarship. But at the end of the day, like it's this final cost that you want to look at. You want to know how much extra are you going to have to take out if you don't have the money to pay for that. Um, so keep that in mind. I want to share this amazing tool. It's provided by HESC and it's a financial aid award letter comparison tool. I'm going to stop my share and then come back really quickly just to share the tool. I provided a sample already, so I have it ready to go. Let me see here. I might have not properly shared. Give me 1 second.
We can see it.
Oh, you can see it. Somehow
Yeah.
I cannot see it. Give me 1 second.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, great. Thank you. So you're going to have access to this link. It is really good. I love the information in here. So you're going to come here and then you're going to enter the program length. Is it a 2-year or 4-year? And then you're going to select the occupation, and this is like really fun because you can see the diversity of fields and occupations there is. For this purpose, I selected an accountant, a mid position, meaning like it's reasonable. Then you're gonna go ahead and enter the name of the school. Just you can make up a name if you want, but I suggest you put a school that you can identify, the total cost of attendance, any grants and scholarship they're getting, the federal loan amount for the student. I just put the student here. I didn't put Parent Plus loans, just for you to get an idea of what will be the additional money you may need to borrow. And then you do that for as many schools as you want. I added a second school, again, cost of attendance, scholarships. Then you can add additional information here. If there is money someone else is going to pay, maybe a grandparent is going to give them some amount. If you have money from a 521, just put it in there. Again, we're looking at a year's worth, so I wouldn't put, like, if you have 100,000 in a 529, I wouldn't put 100,000. You want to figure out what are you allocating per year. Everything is by year. And then here, money parents are going to be willing to provide 15,000. And the magic happens here in the results because it's going to highlight kind of like your best option from an affordability cost perspective. So we have University of A and University of B. You can see the big differences, 20 or almost 20 grand in over 20 grand in difference for cost of attendance. We can see the difference in grants and scholarships again. And then you're looking at the total net cost. How are you going to pay that? And again, you're going to be looking at the federal student loans the student may be eligible for with those limitations. And then you're going to be looking at your resources, whether it's savings, money from work, or if necessary, those Parent Plus loans. And again, last resort, private loans. And then you can scroll down and really, again, digest all of this information. What I really like about this tool is that it provides you an entire explanation with projected monthly payments. So for the student, they would be borrowing, for example, 22,000. Their monthly payment based on a 10-year repayment plan, so it's 10 years after you finish school and start paying, would be about 276, right, for this first example. And then you can see here, if someone is borrowing Parent Plus loans, this is what it's projecting, and the monthly payment would be over $1,000 for 10 years.
Carolina,
Yes.
somebody is saying that they can't see the tool. I mean, I can see it. I don't know if other people are not seeing it, but
I can see it as well.
okay.
I would suggest maybe logging into a different browser and logging back in.
And we're recording this so you can get the recording and then you can fast forward to this section. So going back here again, you really want to be aware of what that amount is going to be because you want to plan, right? Like, when are you going to retire? What is retirement going to look like? Because all of a sudden, 100,000 can be a lot more money if you don't pay it, or if you don't, if you try to repay within a reasonable time, which is 10 years. For federal loans, you're going to have more options in terms of repayment term. For private loans, they're usually looking at repayment from anywhere from 7, 10, 15 years. Private loans, they want their money and they want it a little bit faster. And same thing for this second comparison, right? Like, the difference is huge. So if you take University A and you take out Parent Plus loans, your payment would be about 1,000. You would only take out 95,000. If you go to University B, you could borrow up to 150,000 or may need to. Your payment would be 1,600. So huge difference. And so you can then like review all this information, digest it. You can also print it out if you want to by clicking there. Again, you can add more universities, but I highly recommend you use a tool because you can then step back and really take a look at what the future looks like, not just for the first year, but at the end of those 4 years. Before I go back to the PowerPoint, I want to see if anyone has any questions on this tool. Not that I'm the expert, but we can try to figure it out. Nancy?
Yeah, actually, I'm not sure that everybody can see the tool. It looks like there was just one frozen slide there, and
Oh my goodness.
so I'm not sure that we saw everything that you were describing.
Okay, I think I know what happened. Okay, I'm gonna try again. Sorry about that. Can you see the tool moving now?
Yes.
Okay, I am so sorry. I'm gonna do this again, but really quickly. Okay, amazing tool. You want to use it to compare your college costs. You're gonna be able to select 2 years or 4 years based on the program. You're gonna be able to select the occupation, and I think this is a really good feature because you can see the diversity of careers and expected salaries. Remember, expected salaries, there's tax deductions and all that, but you as an adult will, if you don't know that, you will learn that once you get your job. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes to the school information, you will enter the name of the school. Again, you can make up a name if you don't want to provide it and use the tool, though I don't see why not. Cost of attendance. What is the total cost of attendance? The grants and scholarships you're going to get, and federal loans. For this purpose, I just put the federal loans, the max that the student would be able to borrow. I didn't include plus loans in here for different reasons, but you can go ahead and include it if you want. Now, school number two information, same thing, cost of attendance, grants and scholarships, and then federal loans, same amount. Then you can add additional information. The additional information is like, what are other avenues of funding that you're going to access or have? Keep in mind, all this information you're inputting is usually coming from the financial aid award letter. So you want to like have copies there ready to enter it. And then you also want to come prepare when you sit down and do this with how much are you really going to be able to come up with throughout the year, keeping in mind this is 1 year, but projecting it for the 4 years, right? So for example, 15,000, parents can provide 15,000 of support. Is this for this year only? Keep that in mind because you want to address the 4 years. Let's assume it's for the 4 years, this will be accounted for. Now, when you put all this information in, you get the result. And you can see here, what is the cost of attendance? How much is the student getting in aid? If you notice, the second university is offering like twice as much as the first one, but is that the most cost effective, right? So then you have your total net cost, money that you're gonna have to come up with. Then you use the 5,500 from the student and federal loans that the student would be taking out, and then you have this remaining cost that you need to figure out how you're gonna pay for it. Now, I keep talking as if like everyone here are parents, but you may be the student yourself, so you need to figure out how this is gonna be paid. Usually, it's financed through federal Parent Plus loans, and usually parents can borrow up to the cost of attendance, meaning any difference after applying this. Now, when you scroll down, you're going to see again more comparisons here, and they're going to flag or showcase the quote unquote more affordable option because now you're looking at the total cost for the 4 years. And that's important because I think oftentimes we focus on the 1 year only versus really looking what does it look like if I have to borrow for the 4 years. And as I was saying, when you scroll down here, you can see and get more information of, for example, if this is a student and they borrow 22,000 for the 4 years, the monthly repayment amount for 4 years would be about 276, right? So you can get a sense of how that's going to look like. But remember, it's like 10 years, right? So be aware of that. It's 10 years. Now, you can always repay the loans, as Nancy mentioned, at any point. There's no prepayment penalty. Now, the key here, if you're asking a parent to borrow a Parent Plus loan, or you're the parent that is doing all the behind the scenes, I just want you to be aware of what that's going to look like because again, the number one issue we see with Parent Plus loans is it is very easy to borrow a lot. So here, for example, you're going to see the 95,000, the monthly payment for 10 years is 1,000. Now for University B, you're borrowing like twice, no, 150%, meaning 50,000 more. then your payment is 1,600, right? So that's significant. You may be able to afford 1,000, but not the 1,600. So sorry for the repetition there, and but I think it's important for you to visualize it. Nancy, I'll stop there before sharing my other screen. Any
Uh,
questions?
yeah, there's a lot of questions, and I just want to ask everybody going forward, please put your questions in the Q&A and not in the chat, because I'm just realizing that there are a bunch of questions in the chat that I didn't get to. So I'll go through this quickly. Somebody did have a question about if you're applying for FAFSA as a graduate student, do you need to access your parents' information? And I don't think that you do, but Carolina, maybe you want to weigh in
You
on that.
don't. Once you're going into grad school, you should be considered an independent student. So you only need your parents' information if you are a dependent student. Once you're in grad school, it's all on you. In fact, your parents cannot borrow to help you pay through federal loans a graduate degree.
Right. Okay. Is FAFSA being affected because of the Trump laws? Not yet, but who knows? Stay tuned because there may be some impact. We also don't know whether, hopefully they're going to open the next round of FAFSA on time this year in October, but we'll have to see. Does TAP aid need to be repaid? No, that's basically essentially a grant. When does the Excelsior Scholarship open to apply? The website says May. It doesn't say specifically when in May. So just keep looking at the Excelsior website on they
Yes,
have
and Nancy, end of May is when we're looking at
end of
that.
May.
We
Great.
just don't want to give an official launch date yet.
Okay, great. Thank you. Um, do you report 2023 taxes for FAFSA for the school year 2025, 2026? Yes, that is the year that you need to be looking at. What are other options for grants for families with $125,000 in income? That's probably going to wind up being in addition to the Excelsior, which it has to be below 125,000, TAP has to be below 125,000. You're probably going to be looking at just in college scholarships and private scholarships. I don't know if Carolina, you have something to add to that.
Yeah, and I think that's why I was mentioning that a lot of the aid has very clear thresholds and the income guidelines, with this economy, like it's very hard to live on 125, especially if you're a family. I agree with Nancy that you're just gonna have to be even more aggressive at getting those outside sources and really going back to the college or university and really exploring your options there. A little tip, I think, when you're having these conversations, I think sometimes it's good not to say like, my child really wants to go here. They're their dream school. They're gonna take that as like this parent's gonna be willing to do whatever they need to do to get them in. I think you want to be like, we're reviewing competitive offers, X, Y, and Z, right? So, and obviously, if you have compelling circumstances, you could also raise that, like, two-parent household, a parent recently died. Those are compelling situations that could also help you get more institutional aid.
There's a couple of people have had questions about the numbers that show up on the awards letters, like the little extras like health insurance or books and fees, transportation, personal costs and stuff like that, and how that factors into your loans or how you can basically pay them back. And one person specifically said, does the financial aid package include health insurance, fees, and books? So generally books they list as a separate expense, although I guess it depends on the school. Some of them may just kind of lump it into tuition, but probably not. It's probably going to be sort of an extra expense. The basic idea is that when you get your financial aid, that aid is generally going to go directly to the school to pay for tuition and to pay for room and board if that's applicable. If you
Tuition and fees. There might be some
Yes,
fees.
tuition and fees,
So
right?
yeah, like health insurance is required. If you provide health insurance to your child, you may be able to get a waiver. And I want to say pay close attention to that because we've had some
No.
fiascos where the paperwork didn't go through and then they ended up having to pay for health insurance, a whole mess there. I want to point out that those additional expenses are based on kind of like averages of expected, they use that to be able to give you the total projected cost of attendance minus financial aid. You know, if you are not going to be traveling, maybe the reflected amount there might be less. If you are able to find books more affordable, that may be less. So those are a little bit discretionary, meaning they're going to vary by person, but the school needs a number just to be able to tell, for example, if you're going to get federal loans, they're going to need to be approved for up to this amount. Know that you are never forced to take more than what you need in federal loans. They could offer you $30,000. You only need 5. That's all you need. That's all you take.
Well, and I would just also mention that for undergraduate school, you know, the limits are pretty low in terms of what you get on an annual basis. But let's be between federal loans and TAP awards, you might be and Pell Grants. I mean, you could be eligible for, you know, I don't know, close to probably $20,000 if you're eligible for the maximum for everything. But the bottom line is that if there are expenses left over after you've applied all those expenses to tuition and room and board, that's where you may have to, it's basically up to you whether or not you want to take out additional PLUS loans or private loans to fund those other ancillary expenses. I'm going to ask one more question, Carolina, and then I'm going to go back and start answering the other questions.
Okay.
Typing in, and I'll let you get back to the rest of the presentation.
Great.
So if somebody's made a mistake on their FAFSA and they already had an award letter and accepted it, what should they do?
Usually, I would say you need to correct the FAFSA, but as a first line, I would contact the school to see how they want to address it at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, so again, you're gonna get the link to the tool. I'm gonna stop sharing and then reshare. I'm sorry for the multiple sharing here. Give me 1 second to make sure I share the right page this time. We're almost done. Okay, special considerations and cost reduction tips. I've probably already alluded to all of this, but I want to highlight. Federal loans are going to offer you more protections than private student loans. If you are a parent or you're looking at your parents to help you with undergrad loans through Parent Plus loans, there's a couple of flags I want to give you or tips I want to give you. Right now, our federal student loan system allows Parent Plus loan borrowers to pay based on their income under a plan known income contingent repayment. That is being challenged in court. There may be a lot of changes in the upcoming year, but generally, we recommend for people to consider the lower income parent to borrow the loans, because if they struggle with repayments, they may be able to get a repayment plan based on their income and it would be lower. This generally requires for parents to file separately taxes now. So this is again flagging it with a caveat that there may be some changes down the line. Now, if a parent, if it's a 2 household parent and one parent has medical conditions, chronic or that may lead into disability, we recommend that that parent take out the Parent Plus loans because they may be eligible down the line for relief through a program called Total and Permanent Disability. This is only for federal loans. Again, private loans, the big takeaway. If you're deciding between federal and private and you're going based on the interest, I still recommend you take out the federal and then down the line you can refinance into private because you cannot do it the other way around, as I said. And just flagging, during COVID, a lot of people were steering to private loans because the interest rate was really good. But guess what? That was variable interest rate, and now they're paying 10, 11, 12% in interest. So they went from 4% to now 10. That becomes unaffordable. So we see a lot of clients struggling to repay those private loans right now. Okay, keep in mind, this is more for parents, but if you're a student, you can still digest this information. You want to get a college degree. You don't necessarily, unless you can afford it, are going for the experience. We all want to have like a great college experience, and you can probably do that, but we have to be fiscally responsible. And as a parent, it's really hard to tell your kid, you work so hard, you got into this school, this is your dream school, but I cannot afford it. I get it. But again, you don't want to risk your own financial security. You don't want to risk their own financial future. You don't want to jeopardize your relationship. And I can tell you that I've seen it happen over and over again where relationships are broken because now everyone is in debt for a prolonged period of time or until the end of time because of this cost. So be aware of that. Where are you looking to trim down a little bit? Housing, I mentioned, is probably one of the biggest expenses after tuition and fees. Now, some schools force you to live on campus your first year. They don't even allow you to go off campus. I have mixed feelings about that. I don't think we should be subjecting people to those rules, but that's that. I do recommend exploring, especially after the first year, is there more affordable housing that you can get into to reduce the cost, even if it's a few $1,000s. Now, again, safety first, you want to be comfortable, but you want to be able to explore on campus versus off campus options. Food. Oftentimes, people get the most expensive meal plan only to realize they will never really use the full credit. You may want to start with a lower plan. Understand what are the requirements if you want to switch to a more expensive plan. Don't just go for the most expensive plan from the beginning because, again, you may be wasting money. And I am saying it could be a few hundred, a few $1,000s, but everything adds up. Travel, really understand what that's going to look like and figure out what are parameters. If you're a parent, what are the discussions you're having in terms of expected travel, especially if someone's going to be traveling abroad. And again, you want to make sure that you're covering needs versus wants and not supporting a lifestyle that you may be able to quote unquote support through loans, only to then have to pay a lot more for that. This leads me to the next kind of tip for both students and parents. You want to know your borrowing limit. What is your borrowing limit? Your borrowing limit should not be up to the cost of attendance to my dream school, right? Your borrowing limit should be based on what is the monthly payment that you are comfortable repaying and for how long. And I provided this cheat sheet here. This is again aimed at parents, but we can change the interest rate. You can use a calculator to determine that. If you borrow 50,000, your monthly payment for 10 years is 636. For 25 years is 422. Again, if you're a parent, 25 years, it's a mighty long time. And you're looking into retirement, so keep that in mind. If you're borrowing what I see as an average per kid, it's 100 and something. This is what you're looking at. Again, are you going to be able to afford a payment of 1,200, right? Or more? So keep that in mind because, again, while you're in school or the student is in school, you're not having necessarily to repay if you opt into a deferment. 4 years later, your balance is a lot and you cannot afford any of the repayment plans. Ways students can offset the cost. I already talked about work study. Another one that it's very popular is resident assistant. If the student is living on campus, maybe not the first year and they might not allow you the first year, you want to see if you can apply and get a resident assistant position because it will give you free housing and you also get life experience there. You want to look on campus jobs. I love those because you may get tuition waivers. I can say that when I was going to law school, I had a TA assistant job, and forget about the money they paid me. The tuition reimbursement was fabulous, saving me thousands of dollars. So be sure to explore those. Again, it's a win-win. Summer jobs and paid internships. You can never dismiss this. The summers are short and we all want to have fun. But again, it's a win-win. You get some experience, you get some money to be able to offset those college costs. Be willing to reassess. If you're a student and going to college and after the first semester you're feeling, oh my, this is not for me, or after the first year you're like, you know what, I think I'd rather go home and do something locally. Don't be ashamed of that. Don't be concerned about like what's gonna happen. Do you. No one outside the role is going to be like caring or helping you pay for the debt if you are not really there. And again, it's a very personal decision. Same thing with parents and students. Revisit your budget every year. Every year it's a new opportunity for you to look at where can I save costs. Again, I already mentioned the living on campus versus off campus. Talk to the financial aid office to see if they have institutional aid. Again, big tip. You can always go and have a conversation. If you have special circumstances, you want to elevate those. There are people, and sometimes you just have to get to the right level. There are literally people within the college or university that have the power to go into your account and either delete a balance or give you more aid. You want to have those conversations. Sometimes it requires going up the chain of commands to get to the right people. Uh, Again, if you're struggling, reconsider whether going to a more expensive school is still worth it, and whether coming back it's a better option for you. Again, you don't want to just incur the debt. For parents, the big struggle is obviously you dream of your kid getting that college education, but I can tell you, you should never want it more than they do, because everyone's going to be upset. If they end up quitting, you may be stuck with the loans and not the degree. And trust me, I've seen it happen. Okay, there's a few more things that I'm gonna just show you where you can find them, but this is your contact information. So through EdCap, you can access one-on-one personalized counseling. Everything's free. Uh, we are funded by New York State. You can book a virtual appointment. We do offer time to time in-person appointments depending where you're at. If you really need that, you can email us. You can check out our resources. The online booking appointment is very popular for obvious reasons. You can find a time. All of our counselors are amazing, and they will work with you, and you usually retain the same counselor. So if like 6 months from now you have another question, you can reach out to that same counselor. Additional resources and information. You're going to be able to get this PowerPoint presentation, but I literally asked my staff, my student loan experts, some advice for parents, and you're going to see here the advice that they provided that they thought was very important to highlight. Again, I've already covered most of this, but you'll be able to see it in this framework. There's some Q&As based on common questions that we get, and you're going to have all these amazing tools and links that we've discussed most of them, but just in case they're helpful. Nancy?
Well, there has been a whole bunch of questions, so I've been busy answering questions and not listening
Okay.
to you so much. So let me get to these last few. I'll just ask them live. Can you give, I don't know if you're going to know the answer to this. Can you give a health insurance card to your child if he or she is covered by the parent's employer without buying the school insurance?
Yes, you
Yeah.
can, but it's not just giving the card insurance. You have to do the
Yeah.
paperwork. The school has a waiver that you have to complete. So the waiver says, no, my kid is covered by a health plan, and they may actually ask you to provide that health insurance information, because what if your kid gets sick on campus? They need to have something on file and all that. So it's not just saying, here's the card, use my insurance. You have to file the proper paperwork. It's usually a waiver that you're completing, showing that you have insurance and that you don't need the school insurance.
Somebody's saying I was told that I need to send my kid's birth certificate, but not sure where to send it and why. Not sure who told you to do that. I don't know whether that was FAFSA that told you, but maybe you want to reach out to us for an individual appointment to kind of see what that's all about. If you get the Pell and TAP awards and that covers the tuition cost but not housing, should the child still apply for the Excelsior scholarship? No, Excelsior is only going to cover unpaid tuition costs. So if your tuition costs are already covered through Pell and TAP, there's no really point in going for Excelsior, because there's not going to be anything to give you. And I think that's it so far.
Okay, and in the chat, let me see. I think some of those questions may be in the chat. Yeah, so our EdCap information is here. Honestly, if you just go to our website, edcapny.org, you're going to see the one-on-one help on the corner. You click on that and you can book an appointment. Yes, you should be getting a copy of this presentation. Piper, I'm going to defer to you on that.
Yes, we can absolutely send this out. I think it's a great resource for students and parents.
Great. And we are at time.
Wonderful. Thank you, Carolina, so much. Thank you all for attending tonight's presentation on understanding financial aid award letters. We hope this was helpful in your decision on this important day. Happy College Decision Day. I'm gonna put in the chat where you can find additional events. We have a full schedule for May, so I truly implore you to check out all we have to offer. But I do want to thank you, Carolina and Nancy, so much for the presentation tonight. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening.
Can I just mention, I'm sorry, somebody asked for the link to the Pell Grant website, which I couldn't put in the Q&A, but I did put it in the chat. So hopefully you'll find it there. But you can just Google Pell at Federal Student Aid and it'll come up.
Great.
Thank you all. Thank you,
Thank
Piper.
you guys. Have a great evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.